It's 6:02, so we'll just get started. I'm sure there's going to be a few other people joining us as we go. My name is Rachel. I am the Executive Director at Learning Disabilities Society, and I am joined by Lauren Stinson of Diversity Alliance BC. Do you want to give a wave there, Lauren? And Sarah Vopney, who's our community manager here at LDS too. I think many of you know LDS already. You might be an active family with us, but I just wanted to say a couple of words about our organization to introduce those of you who might be new to LDS, and then Lauren will also introduce Diversity Alliance BC, Disability Alliance BC, sorry. Just checking the chat here. Oh, great. Yes, please introduce yourselves to each other too, as you like. So yeah, Learning Disability Society, or LDS, is a nonprofit charity that has been around now for 50 years. Our mission is to serve all children and youth with learning differences and help to empower them to succeed in life, whatever that looks like for them. Over the past couple of years, we have been growing a lot and adding a lot of new programs to try to find new and different holistic ways to serve the students and families that we work with, and to make sure that our services are accessible to everyone. So all of our services are on a sliding scale based on household income, and we try to keep things pretty adaptable and flexible to meet the needs of our students. One of the other things we pride ourselves on is providing individualized support to meet the needs of each student. So our RISE programming, which is an acronym, it stands for Research Informed Individualized Student Education. And that's kind of the ethos behind how we program all of our one-to-one remedial instruction and support for students, and our other small group programming too, including summer camps, spring break camps, peer social skills programming, and many other programs that we have. And we believe that each student deserves individualized attention and to be able to have instruction and programming that meets their needs and is student-centered, not a cookie cutter kind of approach. So that is something we strive to be doing and always improving and bringing the latest research and things into the fold of what we're doing. To that end, over the past couple of years, another way that we've been growing and trying to enhance the research-informed side of what we're doing is to bring in a lot of assistive technology. So we have been working with a number of different companies and organizations to bring in sponsored software and hardware tools that we hope enhance the experience for our students and our families. The software programs that we have available are available for free at home for our families, and we have a number of hardware tools that are available for our one-to-one in-person sessions here at our East Vancouver and some at our North Vancouver Learning Center as well. And for those of you who might not be aware, we're also, as an extension of that, starting an assistive robotics research project with the University of Waterloo, which we're very excited about. And if you do have a student working with us or wants to work with us, we will be identifying students and recruiting students for use with our social robot in the coming months. And there's kind of extends a lot of research that's been done for students who are on the autism spectrum, and the use of robots in helping to break down barriers in their learning and offer just new, different, accessible ways of trying to figure out ways to get excited about learning. So we're pretty pumped that we've been able to develop that partnership with the University of Waterloo and build on their expertise and bring in some robotics that our kids can hopefully mostly see as a toy, but secretly as a learning tool to break down some barriers for them. We have lots of other exciting things going on. So if you're not already on our newsletter, I would encourage you to sign up for that. It comes out once a month with announcements about our new programs and application and sign up information for that. We are right now taking applications for our summer camp programs, which are full week, full day programs that include some one-to-one learning support as well for kids with learning differences. And we have a summer program for teenagers too. That's a kind of a life skills and work skills transition program called Rise Team. So if you're interested, please get in touch with us. Sarah Vokney, our community manager, is Sarah with an H at ldsociety.ca. And of course, you can just head to our website too if you want some more information. Assuming there's no other questions, that's kind of my general spiel. So I'll let Lauren from DABC take it over.
Thank you, Rachel. So as Rachel mentioned, I'm from DABC, which stands for Disability Alliance BC. We are a BC nonprofit. So what we do is we help disabled people apply for different programs. This includes the disability tax credit, the RDSP, as well as CPP and PWD. We also have a law clinic. So if you're having any kind of legal issues, we have a lawyer and we have people that can help you manage that. So we have a whole bunch of resources to help people get the support they deserve, because so many of the loopholes and hoops that people need to jump through are not accessible for people that have disabilities. So we really try to help people apply for the benefits and the supports they deserve as disabled people. And we've been a nonprofit since 1977. Does anyone have any general questions about Disability Alliance BC? And I will put the contact information at the end of the presentation. And just so you know, my contact information is my name at disabilityalliancebc.org. So it's relatively easy to remember.
Is the referral self-referral for DABC, or do you need a doctor to refer?
Sorry, can you repeat that? You're just quiet.
Yeah, so for clients that want to join your organization for support, is the referral self-referral or is it through a doctor?
Oh, no, you can, it's usually through different emails. We have different emails for each program. So you email and then we will set you with an advocate that can help you with said support. For example, if you email or phone for help with the disability tax credit, you'll be put on a wait list, and then down the line you'll be put in touch with me, one of the disability tax credit advocates. So there's different emails and phone numbers that will attach you to different advocates that can help you with, depending on what support you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
So do you want me to start the presentation now? Yes. Okay. Good.
Absolutely, Lauren, you're all good to go. I think Rachel's said everything about LDS. So yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to share my screen. I also want to note that I will be giving Sarah and Rachel the PowerPoint presentation to email you all after the presentation. So don't worry about frantically writing everything down, because I will be giving you guys the presentation. So the presentation is broken into two parts. The first part is the disability tax credit, and the second part is the RDSP, which is the Registered Disability Savings Plan. So I'm going to go through the disability tax credit first. Then I'm going to ask to open the Zoom room up for questions. And then after the question period, we're going to have a short break and then go into the RDSP section. And then I'll open it up at the end for questions on both. Can everyone see their presentation?
Yeah, Max, looks good.
Thank you. I enjoy feedback. Okay, so for today, we are going to discuss the disability tax credit, and we're going to go over who can get the disability tax credit, how to apply for the disability tax credit, and how to get your doctor's help with filling out the disability tax credit form. Now, the disability tax credit gives you access to the Registered Disability Savings Plan, also known as RDSP. So we're also going to go over who qualifies for RDSP and how it might benefit you with its grants and bonds. So the disability tax credit was created as a non-refundable tax credit to help cover the extra medical costs Canadians with severe or prolonged mental or physical impairments pay. Because we all know being disabled, it costs money. So this is really what the disability tax credit was put in place for, was to counteract those extra costs that it just takes being disabled. In 2018, a research study found that 40% of Canadian adults with qualifying conditions that could currently benefit from the DTC weren't getting the DTC because of access barriers. So first, I'm going to explain what the disability tax credit is. So the disability tax credit helps you pay less tax, or the person that supports you to pay less tax. The disability tax credit is based on your income tax. Therefore, if you don't owe income tax, then you will not get any money back for the disability tax credit. One of the benefits of the disability tax credit is that you can get up to 10 years previous from the year you applied. The disability tax credit, once you are approved, opens up other benefits, including the Canadian Workers Benefit Disability Supplement, which is an income tax amount again, as well as a child payment benefit. So that's the child disability benefit, is you get a small payment for if you have a disabled child. And it also opens up the homeowner's buyer's amount, which if your home is approved and you're a first-time buyer, you can get $5,000, as well as opening up the Registered Disability Savings Plan, or the RDSP, which I will be going into more detail later on today. So first, I'm going to go over if you're eligible for the disability tax credit. One of the most important things to remember is that it's the DTC, or the disability tax credit, has nothing to do with if you go to work or school. It does not depend on your income or assets. Instead, you get approved for the disability tax credit if you have a severe and prolonged impairment. This impairment can be mental or physical. So the most important things to remember to get approved for the disability tax credit is you must have a severe and prolonged impairment. And I will go over what the definition of severe and prolonged are. So firstly, prolonged means the impairment has lasted or will last at least 1 year. So there's 3 aspects that qualify an impairment to be equal or to be considered severe. And these are markedly restricted, which is very restricted in one basic activity of daily living. Now, in the coming slides, I will go over what the basic activities of daily living are for the disability tax credit. This means you either can't do the activity, need a lot of support to do an activity, or take a lot longer to do said activity. Another way you can be approved for the disability tax credit is if you're cumulatively restricted, which is when you're restricted a little less, but in 2 or more of the basic activities for daily living. The third severe impairment, which can get you approved, is if you need therapy that keeps you alive and takes up a lot of time. So those are the 3 main severe impairments that can get you approved for disability tax credit. So these are the basic activities of daily living for the disability tax credit. They are vision, speaking, eating and making food, hearing, walking, eliminating, which means issues with bladder or bowel movements, dressing, and mental functioning. So you can either be markedly restricted in one of these areas, or you can be cumulatively restricted, which is when you're restricted a little less, but in multiple areas shown here. One really important thing to note about disability tax credit is that it's not connected to your diagnosis. Approval for the disability tax credit is connected to how severely you are impaired by your restrictions. Therefore, stating your diagnosis makes you restricted in walking, for example, is not enough information. To get approved, you really need to provide examples of how your disability or impairment impacts your daily living and how it restricts you. So now I'm going to go into how to apply for the disability tax credit. So there's 3 main steps. Now, the disability tax credit on the Canadian government website, the form is called T2201. Now, the first section of the form you can fill out yourself, and that's your personal information. The second section of the form must be filled out by a doctor or specialist. You then mail in the form or send it in online to the Canada Revenue Agency. And just a reminder, before you send off your disability tax credit paperwork, to keep copies, because once you send it to the CRA, it's really difficult for them to provide copies back to you, and that could take a while. So I highly recommend keeping a copy of your disability tax credit paperwork before you send it into the Canadian Revenue Agency. So, as I mentioned before, the second part of the form, part B of the disability tax credit, needs to be filled out by a doctor or specialist. Now, it's important to note there's only 2 kind of doctor positions that can fill out all sections, mental and physical, and this would be the medical doctor or nurse practitioner. So only one doctor can sign the form. So if you have kind of a speech impediment and a vision problem, your ophthalmologist and your speech therapist cannot both sign the form. However, one of them could send a letter, could write a letter of support to your ophthalmologist, for example, but only one doctor can sign the form. So if you have severe mental restrictions and physical restrictions, it's best to get a medical doctor or a nurse practitioner to sign the disability tax credit form. So finding someone to fill out the form. It's really important to have a good relationship with the doctor that's helping you fill out the form, because it's really important that they know your health. Because as I mentioned before, the disability tax credit is not based on diagnosis, but instead the symptoms and how they impact your life. So therefore, having a really good grasp of how your life is affected and being able to find and write down those examples of how your life is restricted daily is really important for the approval of the disability tax credit. Your doctor might charge a fee, and I always note that you should remind them that you're on a budget as a disabled person and as a caregiver of a disabled person and a member of a disabled family. So now I'm going to kind of go into some examples of how you should write the letter of impairment for the disability tax credit. So this is an example for hearing. So I'm going to quickly read this out. So it says, applicant relies on lip reading and sign language to understand verbal communication substantially all of the time, despite the use of a hearing aid. An applicant takes at least 3 times as long as the average person their age to understand a spoken conversation and requires others to raise their voice and repeat words and sentences several times despite the use of a hearing aid. Here it's good to note that they mentioned how much more time it takes someone to do something compared to someone without their restrictions, as well as stating that they are still restricted regardless that they have a hearing aid. So it's kind of important details mentioned in this example. So within the mental functioning section, there's many subsections within the mental functioning section that you can touch on when writing up your impairments for disability tax credit. And some sections you should focus on are self-care, which entails dressing, feeding, waking up in the morning, those types of things, as well as health and safety, which encompasses kind of panic attacks and paranoia. Then we have social interactions, simple transactions, memory and cognitive function. And then the last subsection of the mental functioning is problem solving, goal setting, and judgment. It's also important to note when writing about the mental functioning section, the symptoms that people show can either show up at any time or be present 90% of the time. So these are some kind of narrow examples for the mental functioning section of the disability tax credit form. So the first one on the right of the screen is for social interaction. So here we write the patient requires longer to respond to conversation due to brain fog and restrictive cognitive functioning or severe social anxiety. Patient isolates most of the time due to depression. The patient is restricted in the ability to read social cues. What is important here is that we mention the restrictions And then we mentioned what causes the restrictions, which is important to note, that you mentioned how you're restricted and what causes those restrictions in your daily life. So the next example I have is for self-care, and it says the patient is unable to complete self-care tasks, including brushing teeth, showering, getting dressed, and getting out of bed and eating due to low motivation and severe depression. And then the third example has to do with memory. And these can be the patient needs reminders to attend appointments, sometimes forgets addresses, phone numbers, or names, or the patient needs reminders to stay on task. So those are a few examples of how you would write up the mental function section for disability tax credit 4.
Maybe ask a question here or at the end.
Yes, sure.
So on the recall of information, so I was helping somebody and with filling out, and the person was studying as well, and did not qualify because it seemed that you could have tools to recall to kind of mitigate the memory impairment, like iPhone, iPad, write down appointments, whatever, and make notes. So is that a valid argument from CRA that there is? And so there's two aspects. One is like a hearing impairment, which is severe, but they would say, oh, go get a device that will help you hear better. And the other one is the memory impairment, where there are technological assistive devices like iPad, iPhone. Is that a valid argument or not?
So they told you he wouldn't apply because there was aids out there to benefit him?
Yeah, and it was very vaguely put in, but yeah, it says that, okay, if you have, it's similar to like if you have, let's say, a mobility impairment, but you could get a wheelchair that can take you to places, then you are no longer restricted. So what's your experience?
That is true, that if your assistive aids are working, then you will not be approved for disability tax credit. So if you need a hearing aid and your hearing aid allows you to hear 100%, then you will not qualify for disability tax credit. But in your case, I would say that I would look into if you put down, if you were visually and mentally markedly restricted, or if you applied under being cumulatively restricted for mental functioning and vision, because you have a better chance of getting approved if you are restricted in vision and mental functioning and you put it in the cumulative section instead of saying you're both markedly restricted in both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you need minimum 2 then for the.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I will review that. That's really helpful.
The bar for market restriction is relatively high.
Yes, yeah.
So if you're only trying to shoot for market restriction, it will be hard to get approved, because like as many as you know, that disability is very fluid and has an array, it has an array of disabilities. So most people fall within kind of like cumulative section more so than the market restriction section.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay. So one more question, sorry about that. I don't want to, like you mentioned that diagnosis is kind of less important, but the impact is more important. But are there certain conditions that are a slam dunk that would qualify if the diagnosis put in by a doctor, like things like arthritis, which people know, like obviously has a lot of restrictions, or do you always have to specify how it's affecting you?
I would say nothing's a slam dunk, but for walking, for example, if you use a wheelchair all the time, then that would be considered markedly restricted, and you would have a good chance of getting approved if you're a wheelchair user full time. Or for the hearing section, if you're deaf, or if you're for the vision section, if you're blind. And for the mental functioning section, it's harder to prove for the mental functioning section, but the line would be if you needed like full-time care, then you would have the highest chance of getting approved. But I would definitely say, regardless of how sure you are that you're going to get approved in each section, I would recommend still adding examples to make sure you get approved.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I must say these slides are wonderful. I have never seen such a nice structured presentation.
Thank you. Cynthia, my coworker, made it. I think she might be in the Zoom call, so you can give her props.
Yeah, good job, Cynthia. You're hired.
So is there any more questions? Okay. So the third thing you can be approved for the disability tax credit for severe impairment is life-sustaining therapy. So that is therapy that basically keeps you alive and takes up a lot of time. This can include medication for diabetes or kidney dialysis. So at minimum, the life-sustaining therapy would need to be 3 times a week and an average 14 hours a week. And so this is a chart that you would make up for the disability tax credit form, outlining how long your therapy takes. So now I just want to go over some important phrases for disability tax credit. This is substantially all of the time, which means that you're restricted the majority of the time, requires assistance, is unable to manage an activity, and then it's really important to kind of put a time frame of how long it takes you to do things. So taking 3 times or 2 times as long to complete an activity. What not to include with the disability tax credit is the ability to work, housekeep, manage a bank account, drive, or any recreational activities. The Canadian Revenue Agency, or the CRA, doesn't really care about those things, so I would recommend keeping them out of the write-up. And some helpful tips when preparing your disability tax credit. Prepare for your appointment. Draft examples from your daily life. So you're able to go over kind of those daily examples with your doctor. You can also contact us at Disability Alliance BC, and we can assist you with writing up a 10 out of 10 letter of impairment for your disability tax credit. But as the disability tax credit advocate, it has a wait list. So it can take some time to get in contact with an advocate from Disability Alliance BC. We also have a disability tax credit tool, which is at the link at the bottom of the slide. And this can go over different sections the CRA is looking for within the disability tax credit, but you would still need to add examples from your daily life to kind of flesh out the application. But it's an awesome tool to give you that bare bones and help you fill out a letter of impairment with your doctor. So the second point is submitting your disability tax credit. So there's two ways you can submit your disability tax credit. And I want to remind you to keep a copy of the paperwork before you send it in. There's two ways you can do it. You can submit your disability tax certificate, disability tax credit certificate online digitally to the Canada Revenue Agency CRA My account, or you can mail in your disability tax credit paperwork to the disability tax credit unit in Winnipeg, which is the disability tax credit unit for within all of BC. So once you submit your disability tax credit, it may take 3 to 4 months for the CRA to make a decision and inform you via a letter called the Letter of Determination. Now, when you're waiting 3 or 4 months to hear back from the Canadian Revenue Agency, you can call them at 1-800-959-8281 to check your application status, or you can also check digitally on your CRA account. So once your application is submitted, there's a couple of options. A lot of the times, the Canada Revenue Agency will have questions and will want an additional questionnaire sent to your medical practitioner. This is really common, so don't panic if you're asked for additional questionnaire. A lot of the times when you submit your disability tax credit, you're not submitting all your medical paperwork. So a lot of times they might want to inquire about some of that medical paperwork. So it's quite common for them to ask additional questions. The second option is that you're approved. Now, there's an important thing to note here is that you can be approved permanently or you can be approved for a set of years. So the CRA might think that your disability will improve and you will no longer be impaired. Therefore, you're only approved for a set amount of years. So it's really important to look into what your letter of determination says and make note of when your disability tax credit expires so you can reapply. Now, the third option is if you're denied. Now, if you're denied, you can have a year to resubmit more information. So a lot of times on the letter of determination, they will say why you were denied. Now you have a year to resubmit more information to the CRA. And then there's a second option. If you think your application is perfect, then you have 90 days to submit a formal objection to the Chief of Appeals of Tax Court. But the majority of the time, in my experience, usually we can get clients approved by just adding more information to their application. So yeah, that is the end of the disability tax credit portion of this presentation. So now I can open it up to all of you if you have any questions.
How long is the wait list to get support from the BC Alliance?
Our phone logs are roughly a month, and then
Okay.
the getting an appointment after you get in contact with us is about a month. And then we need to write up the reports, and that's about half a month. So in general, it'd be about 2.5 months roughly.
No, I mean, I think that's fairly fast. So
Oh, good.
cool.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I have one more question about the expiry. So even like I found that even though the disability is permanent and severe and there is no prospects of improvement, they still kind of put you through this painful process of giving you a time limited approval, like could be like 3 years, 4 years, whatever, and then you got to go through this whole thing again and again and again. Have you had success in getting CRA to acknowledge and provide a permanent one nowadays, or is it always that they give you like 3 years or 4 years? Or...
I mean, it's with mental functioning, it's difficult to get an indefinite one. It's hard. It's their call. But I completely understand. But one of the things I recommend is that keep a copy of your application. Sometimes people's disability doesn't even change within the 5 years. So really, you just need to resubmit the application you submitted and just change it slightly from what you originally submitted.
Yeah.
So I recommend keeping a copy of all the disability tax credit write-ups you make, so it'll make your life a lot easier in the future when you need to resubmit.
Yeah, okay. Have you successfully been able to appeal to get it turned to a permanent record rather than expiry every few years? Have you been successful in cases or no?
Yeah, well, actually, we've never fought directly to get someone approved indefinitely, but I did have a client last month that did have a time period set for his disability. And when I helped him reapply because his disability tax credit expired, and the CRA approved him indefinitely. So he had a period of time, and then he was approved to indefinitely.
Yeah.
So it can change.
Okay. Did you do anything specific to, because it's all about wordings, I guess, eh?
It is. The thing is, it's the CRA's call if they think that the disability will improve or not. So if you're permanently blind, or you're permanently deaf, or you have a physical disability like cerebral palsy, then you're probably going to be improved indefinitely. But as I said, it's their call, and I know for a lot of people that have mental restrictions, it's more difficult to get improved indefinitely under the mental functioning section.
Yeah, that's good. That's great input from you. So yeah, really, appreciate your comments on that. It's just for families who are going through this. It's like, like they're never sure, like, because they open an RDSP, but it's only kind of valid for like few years, and you're going to reapply, and if they don't approve it, then your RDSP is now in jeopardy. So maybe you can talk about that in your next section.
Yeah, that's one of the points I will touch on later in the presentation, is that when your registered disability savings plan is connected to your disability tax credit, so if you are denied, your registered disability savings plan will be frozen. So your disability savings plan you won't be able to put money in, and you won't be able to, no money will be put into the account, and the withdrawal restrictions still apply, which I will go over, but you can still get your money once it's time to withdraw. So you don't lose anything that you already put into your RDSP. if you lose the disability tax credit. You just won't gain any more from it.
Yeah, okay.
Does anyone else have any questions?
If I may,
Yes.
I have a son and he's like 7 years old and he has ADHD and he's been diagnosed with a few learning disability. I mean, to me, he's perfect, but he struggles on the daily, especially in school. And someone had mentioned the DTC to me. And, you know, I've looked into it on support groups or whatever. And this is how I came across this presentation and figured, you know, I'll educate myself a little bit more. Like, but I think, so I spoken to his doctor, who's relatively a newer doctor. He's very young. And when I mentioned it to him, and he's like, he's 7, like, you know, he can eat and go to the bathroom by himself. And, you know, I brought up the mental functioning part. So, you know, for me, you know, and I don't want to jeopardize the relationship with his pediatrician by any means, but I tend to wonder if he has a skewed vision of the DTC, or if I should try it. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the worst possible thing is that you get denied. And you can always, even if you get denied, you have the year after the letter of determination, you can reapply. So even if you get denied as when he's a kid, you can always reapply a year later or a set years later. There's no cutoff date for how many times you can apply. So there's that to keep in mind as well. And for someone who's a child, because you said he's 7, one of the important things to note is he going to reach the milestones of his peers? So when you're talking about social ability and how social he is and how restricted is he able to reach those social milestones of children his same age? So that's how I would structure it.
But what's a social milestone at that age?
That's a good question.
Can I jump in, Lauren, and maybe just help out a little? Is that okay? I just wanted to share, MJ. Sorry, I just had to move my little one out of the room.
That's fine.
So she's 8. She is diagnosed, and we already have DTC. I'm in this presentation because I want to learn about the latter part of this presentation.
Okay.
So we applied, and she can go to the bathroom by herself. She does eat by herself, but she doesn't use utensils. She uses her fingers only. But she eats. Hey, she eats very well, right? But the thing is that she has developmental disability too, right? So even though she's 8, her mentality is 3. So she's not reaching those milestones. So for example, she doesn't understand that the stove is hot and it will burn her. She doesn't know that scissors and knives can cut. It's not just another piece of toy or whatever it is that she can pick up like a Lego block, right? She doesn't understand that cars move even in the parking lot, not just on the streets. Right. So it's these other things that add up. Right. So she does have lots of sensory processing needs as well, you know, for regulation and everything else. So it's very similar to ADHD in some sense. But you can look at like a lot of different things. I mean, she doesn't mind having her clothes on. Sometimes she will strip naked, depending if it's wet clothes or not. She'll strip naked if the clothes is wet because it's a sensory thing again. But she cannot dress herself. Right. So she can get out of her clothes quickly enough, but she can't put it back on. Even if, you know, I was to give her clothes, she can't put it back on by herself. So again, it's those kind of things. They all add up. like Lauren says, right? So you have to think about the cumulative and how it affects them. So if you want to look at milestones on your child's age, you can actually go Google it and look up milestones for a 7-year-old. What should they do? So the other physical thing is that my little one, she can't kick a ball, she can't throw a ball, she can't hold a pen. Thus, no using forks and knives, right? It's a motor skill that's lacking.
Well, mine too has fine and gross motor skill issues, but I mean, to look at him, like as far as physical disabilities, you wouldn't come to that conclusion unless, every specialist has pointed it out. But like, so we do occupational therapy for that. But then if I look at the criteria for the DTC, like, is that under mental functioning? Because he can walk, but he can't write. And mine too eats with his fingers.
I would suggest that it would.
Sorry, I don't want to take over your presentation. I think we've done
the cumulative section of the DTC where he is less restricted in multiple areas, because I would suggest that you could make an argument that he is cumulatively or less restricted in feeding and dressing and mental functioning, and submit the disability tax credit that way.
I see what you're saying.
As I said, you have to look at the milestones and see if he kind of hits them or not.
Okay. Thank you.
So do people want to take a break before I go into the RDSP? Okay, I'm having people shake their heads. Okay, so is it okay if I keep going?
I'm good. I'm good to carry on.
Oh, good. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the RDSP, which stands for the Registered Disability Savings Plan. So the RDSP, or the Registered Disability Savings Plan, was created by the federal government as a long-term savings plan for people with disabilities and their families. So it's really important that it was put in place as a long-term savings plan. It was originally created for a saving plan for disabled children, so they have money once their parents passed on. So that's why it's a long-term savings plan. It can help you gain money even if you can't put any money into the plan. And that is in the form of bonds, which I will go into in more detail later. The good thing about the RDSP is that it won't affect your other disability benefits. This includes person with disabilities and CPP, for example. So to qualify for the Registered Disability Savings Plan, you must be a Canadian resident, you must have a social insurance number or a SIN, and most importantly, you must be approved for the disability tax credit. Now, because of the long-term savings plan, there is an age criteria. You must open your RDSP by December 31st of the year you turn 59. And you must open your RDSP by December 31st of the year you turn 49 to qualify for the grants and bonds it provides. So if you open your RDSP before you turn 49, you can access up to $90,000 in government bonds and matching grants. So first I'm going to go over the grants, and then I'm going to go over the bonds. So to get the grants, you need to put money into your RDSP. Now for the first $500 you put in to your RDSP per year, the government will put $3 for every $1, which means for the first $500 you put into your RDSP, the government will give you $1,500. Now for the second section, for the next $1,000 you put in, the government will match $2 for every $1, meaning for this $1,000 you put in, you will get 2,000. So the important thing to remember about the RDSP is to get the full matching grants, you need to put in $1,500 per year. So 1,500 is like the magic number to get the matching grants from the government. So that's the most important thing to remember. So now I'm going to go into bonds, and bonds will be applied to your RDSP automatically if your family income is lower than $31,711. You can receive $1,000 in bonds every year automatically until the year you turn 49. But there's a maximum, which is 20,000. So that's a maximum of, if you get $1,000 a year, that's a maximum of 20 years. But you can get it for longer. For example, if your child's living at home and the family income is above 31,000 and they don't qualify for the bonds, but then your child moves out on their own and they no longer make above 31,000, then they will get the bonds for at least 20 years if they never go above that 31,711,000. So it's about, you get roughly 20 years of bonds from the Canadian government. Also, you can claim your grants and bonds retroactively from up to 10 years before you applied. To get your retroactive grants, you must open your RDSP by December 31st of the year you turn 49. This is because the money from your RDSP gets automatically taken out when you turn 60. Therefore, to get all the retroactive bonds and grants, you need to open it up. You need to open it up before you turn 49, so you can get that 10 years going forward and the 10 years retroactively, which equals that 20-year span. So you will receive your bonds you're owned automatically. Now it's slightly tricky how much money to put in to get your matching grants for your RDSP. So I would suggest talking to a financial advisor about how much money you should put in if you're planning to get retroactive matching grants, because the numbers can be slightly tricky. So one of the important rules for the RDSP, because it was made for a long-term savings plan, is a 10-year repayment rule. And this is if the holder takes out money before the government's final contribution, they will have to pay back all or part of the grants and bonds they received in the past 10 years. So to get money out of the RDSP, you need to take it out 10 years after the government's final contribution, and this can be a grant or a bond. Money will automatically be taken out once you hit 60. So this is where I was talking about, if your disability tax credit is denied and your account is frozen, your money will sit there until you are 60 and it will be withdrawn. So the RDSP at minimum is a 30-year savings plan. If you match all the grants and are under the 31,000 household income limit for the bonds, you get the $1,000 every year. At minimum, the RDSP is 30 years because you need to wait 10 years to withdraw. So say you have a child and you open up their RDSP when they're a kid, and you wait this 10 years, you can withdraw the money from the RDSP before they turn 60. You just have to remember that you need to wait 10 years after the government's final contribution before you can take out your money without facing penalties. And then I also want to note that there is a $150 grant available from the Vancouver Foundation to help with the RDSP. And the link is in the slide. And as I mentioned before, Sarah and Rachel will provide you guys with this PowerPoint after the presentation. And I also want to note that even if you're above 59, you can still benefit from having an RDSP because the RDSP doesn't affect your PWD or your other assets. So if you have like a large sum of money coming in that would affect your PWD, you can open an RDSP and put your money away so it won't affect your supports. So that's one benefit of the registered disability savings plans for someone who's over kind of the age requirements. Okay, now I'm going to open up for questions.
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
I have two questions. You mentioned the 10-year minimum waiting period from the government's final contribution. What does that mean? For example, is it the final contribution towards the maximum amount, or for example, if we start RDSP this year, we contribute $500 every year, then does it mean from year 11 we can withdraw, or we have to wait until the maximum contribution?
It's their final contribution. So it doesn't start from the, so it's, if you've been putting in for 10 years, you need to wait and say the final year is, the last contribution they made was 2011, even though you opened it in like 20 years before. Sorry, I need to do math, but it would be based on the last year, the final contribution. So it'd be 10 years after that. So if someone opens an RDSP, it takes about 20 years to get all the bonds and grants. You need to wait another 10 years after that to be able to take money out without penalties.
So the earliest withdrawal date is 30 years after opening, correct?
Yes, at minimum. But as I said, like that can fluctuate depending on if you didn't get approved for the bonds at the beginning, and then if you got approved for the bonds later in life, then it might, then you would have your, like a longer date. Or if you did retroactive payments or didn't pay for the grants every year, then your RDSP might have a longer time period. But if you got all the bonds and grants, if you got all the bonds and grants, it would be a 30-year time span.
All right, thank you. Just one more question regarding the, so if we open RDSP for our minor children who are minors, and the money is after tax of our income. So later on, when they become adults, when they start to withdraw funds from their own RDSP, will the portion the contribution parents made subject to tax, or we already pay tax, right?
Yes, it is subject to tax.
Even the parents' contribution?
I'm not 100% sure. I know part of it is taxable. I'm not sure if it's, I don't think it's the whole thing. I'll look into that for you. It might be only the government portion.
Okay, is there a way we can confirm that?
No, I'll look into that and then email Sarah about it.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Lauren. The contribution you're suggesting, the $1,500 max a year for the grants. Now, is that for like, is there a limit, or can you just do that like forever?
They were matching up to. Is there a amount? I think there was an. Hold on. What did it say? It goes up to.
Oh, 70. Sorry, I didn't see it. It was so tiny.
There we go. Yes, 70.
Thank you.
Thank you. I thought it said somewhere on there, which is, I think that's also 20 years of grants. Let me double check the math. I think that is also 20. Yes, so that is also 20 years of grants.
Perfect, thank you.
Depending how much you put in to begin with, it can stretch out that time period.
So to maximize this, if you start at age 29, and then so by the time you reach 49, then you have 20 years, then you could maximize everything? Is
yes, because you can get 10 years retroactively, and then you have 10 years moving forward to when you need to withdraw at 60. So that's where the kind of 20-year window for grants and bonds is.
Oh, I see. Yeah. And then after age 49, there will be no more grants given, right? It's always before 49.
No, there's no grants given after 59 because the money starts to withdraw at 60. So you will not get any grants after 59.
So if you were to start early, say, and you max out everything, all the grants and bonds by the time you're 49, does this mean you can start withdrawing at 50? Or you still have to wait that 10 years? And
10 years. You need to wait 10 years after the final grant or bond is put into your account by the government. So if the final grant and bond was put into your account, you would need to check the exact date. It goes by exact date when the government put in the contribution. So it would be like if you say it's in when your child's 49, they get all the bonds and grants, then they can take it out at 59 with no penalties.
So is that true then if you start your child at like say 1, you do the 30 years, and they max out everything, and you can start taking it out when they're 40 or 31, sorry?
Yeah, basically, yes.
Yeah, really? Okay, thank you.
I was going to say, sir, Lauren, we have actually opened up our RDSP for both our children who are on the spectrum. They're autistic. They've just got their autism diagnosis this last year. And yes, it's something we're just adding in periodically off the paycheck, in small amounts, and they just match it. I think it's up to $1,000, I was told, for the first year, for the first years until they're 18. And then after that, it goes to 3,500.
The grants is directly connected to how much money you put in. Let me pop up the slide. There you go.
I heard that if the child is minor, so let's say if you start at age 1 or 2 or 3, it's the family household income that is counted. So if you both parents are working, then you may have a reduced qualification.
Yeah, if your family income is over $31,711, then you will not get the bonds for your RDSP. But once your kid moves out, or when your household has a lower income, then they will get the bonds automatically.
Yeah.
And I also want to note for the grant amount, it's not really based on their age, it's based on how much you contribute to the RDSP. So for the first $500, the government will contribute $3 for every $1, so it's not connected to your kid's age. And that's the same for the $1,000, where you get $2 for every $1. So I would regardless of your child's age, if you put in $1,500 per year, the government will match you $3,500.
I have a question about the DCP. Do you guys have any psychologists that you would recommend that are more specialized at working with learning disabilities or mental functioning, like maybe on your website? Because when I was looking into them, it was more about, emotional or depression, but I'm dyslexic. I don't mind telling the group. So I was just wondering if you know anyone specialized in that, more in that side of things.
We don't have any direct connections to therapists and doctors, and we're not really allowed to recommend people to certain people.
Oh, but funny. Okay, that's fine. But
we do have a database of information for doctors in your area that I can provide you as well. I'll make a note of that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you write out your, what do they call it? When you give your examples, if you're applying for the DTC, is there a specific format? Should you be doing it in point form, your example? Should you be writing it in essay-like? Do you have any insight on that?
Yes. Well, the way we do it at Disability Alliance BC is that we can write it in paragraph form. Let's see. Do I have an? You guys are still seeing my screen, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let me see if I can pop one up on the screen for you guys. Looking at someone who's let's look at someone who's approved, shall we? So this would be an example of what we do here. So we write it in paragraph form. So she's markedly restricted in walking. So we have a walking section, and then the mental functioning section, we break it into sections here. So we write it within paragraph format, usually starting with how they're restricted.
Can you share your screen, or?
Can you see my screen?
We can only see the slide, but I think you were referring to something else, right?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you could see my screen. Hold on.
No.
I think we can just see your PowerPoint, not your desktop.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I'll try to show my screen. Hold on. Okay, now can you see it?
Yes.
That's great.
So we write it in kind of paragraph format. So we write walking, and then so we prefer paragraph format. For the mental functioning section, we kind of chunk it out within the subsections. and then like this person is markedly restricted in mental functioning and walking, and then they're cumulatively restricted in multiple sub areas. And that's an important thing to note as well, is that you can be approved for the disability tax credit for being markedly restricted in one area or cumulatively restricted. But if you can apply for as many sections as possible, we recommend doing that. So even if they're still markedly restricted, we recommend still putting a cumulative restrictive section in if they apply for that as well, just to be on the safe side.
Thanks. It looks very clean.
That's a great example. So do you attach that to the, because there's not enough space in the form, so the doctor would just sign that and just attach it, or do you have to write it in the form?
Yes, within the disability tax credit form, it will ask you to write the letter of impairment, and it says, what we write is this, see attached document, and then you staple the write-up to the disability tax credit form.
Okay, yeah, good. Great example that you have there. I never knew, like, I probably have to redo it because I was just putting it in like just few lines because it couldn't fit in the form.
Oh, I mean, yes, that's one of the, we recommend that you write on a separate form, just so, because they don't provide a lot of information on the form for what they want. So for people that only write on the form, because they don't provide enough room, usually get denied because there's not enough room to provide enough information.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I highly recommend writing it on a different piece of paper. So is there any other questions?
May I just ask one more question? Understand RDSP does not affect the person's PWD. Does it apply at the time when they withdraw funds from RDSP as well?
Yes, I'm pretty sure once you withdraw the money from the RDSP, it will affect, it will be counted as like money and will affect your PWD and whatnot.
Oh, so it's only the contribution period, like 20 years, when the grant and the bond was put into RDSP account, that period that doesn't affect PWD. But once it's mature and able to be taken out, that's considered a kind of regular income.
But you don't need to take it out all at once.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're worried about it affecting your PWD, I would recommend taking it out in small portions.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and at what age does the PWD end? So it will end at age 60 or 65?
The PWD, you go into like old, I think it's 67 when you can apply for like old age grants and old age supplements, and then you are no longer on the PWD.
I see. Okay. So if you wait till age 60, then you are only on like CPP or whatever it is. Would it then affect if you start taking out your grant? Would it affect the CPP or your pension or whatever? Or
once you take it out, it will affect. If there's penalties to the other things you're on, it will affect it. It only does not affect your PWD and other items when it's in your RDSP account.
I see. Okay. So once you start taking out, you have to probably consult an expert on how much and to make sure it doesn't affect any other benefits, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But while it's growing inside, you don't have to worry, right? It can grow tax-free inside without any implications. Once you start withdrawing, then you have to plan, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly. As I said, you can decide how much to take out once you hit 60. So you don't need to take it out all at once. So that's something to keep in mind.
So do we have a lot of experience with, because this is something that was set up maybe some time ago, but do we have experience with people now ready to take it out and having implications, or is it still too early?
The start year of the RDSP, I think, was in 2007. 2007 is somewhere around there. So we're not quite at that point yet where people are able to kind of match all the grants and bonds and take out their money with no penalties. So yeah, so we're not at that point since the RDSP is still new.
Yeah, okay. So can you go back retro then? Let's say you get your disability tax credit granted today. Like, can you go back to 2007?
You can claim your grants and bonds up to 10 years.
Oh, 10 years. Okay.
So that would be, at this point, that'd be 2012?
Yeah. Okay.
No, 2011?
Yeah, close. Yeah, so you can't go back to the earliest. So, okay, that's good to know. And then can you claim lump sum for the 10 years, or you going to do year by year?
Sorry, what do you mean?
So let's say you get it today. Let's say you get your approval for the disability tax credit today. And then you want to go back 10 years to collect the 3,500, right? Do you have to do, can you do that in, let's say in year, so let's say next year, can you say, okay, I want to put in 10 years worth of principal amount, and then you get the lump sum of 10 years worth of grant, or you have to do it?
There is a set amount you can put in per year.
Okay, I see.
I think it's on the slide somewhere. Hold on. I think it's, you can apply for $10,000 worth of grants per year. There is a limit for the retroactive grants.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's around 10,000. I think I'll double check for you. I should know that, but I'm really bad with numbers.
That's good. Okay.
But it does have a set amount, so you can't go back the full 10 years in 1 year retroactive grants.
Yeah, so you have to spread it over several years, I guess, right? To go back 10 years, I guess, right? Yeah. Okay. And then you mentioned that you have on your website, you mentioned that there is a way to help people apply for the disability tax credit. There's some question and answers. That does that then, once you do that, does that then spit out the form that you just showed, that example, or is it different?
Are you talking about a disability tax credit tool?
Yes.
Yes. So that will just go over kind of the subsections and the sections of the disability tax credit with a few examples or a few prompt questions, but it won't provide you specific day-to-day examples. So it's the disability tax credit tool is a good structure for the base of your disability tax credit letter of impairment, but I would suggest adding in your own personal examples.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry to ask this because I showed up quite late to the meeting. Thank you first of all for doing this. I see it's being recorded. Is it possible to send the recording to the attendees?
Is Sarah still with us?
Yeah. Hi, Lauren. Yes, absolutely. I will send everybody the recording tomorrow, as well. If anybody has any extra questions, I know it's coming to 7:30 right now. If you have any questions after digesting all the information today, please send me an email. I can pass it along to Lauren as well. I think at the top of the chat, you'll see both Lauren's email, lauren@disabilityalliancebc.org. And then I'm Sarah at ldsociety.ca. So I will send the recording out tomorrow, and please send any questions you have when you have them.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Lauren, is that everything from you? I think that's all the questions. It's 7:27 now.
Yep, and I will get back to you tomorrow with as many answers to the questions you guys had today.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, Lauren, for all this information. That was so wonderful. And thank you for everyone who came. And again, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about LDS for me, about the tax credit. We'll get back to you with as much information as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.